Hey y'all, welcome back to our channel. This is Malcolm.
And I'm Lindsay, and you are listening to Comic Edition. On this week's episode of Office Hours, Malcolm and I have a lot to talk to you about.
We are less than 2 weeks away from the premiere of Quantumania. We've been looking forward to this for so long. It almost feels strange to say it's next week, but Lindsay and I have our tickets. We are ready to go. First IMAX showing February 16th, which is Thursday. Don't let them fool you.
That's right.
The release is Thursday.
That's right. We are going at 3:30 p.m., folks, right in the middle of the school day, but we can't miss it. We can't be late to the conversation, which is why we have to unpack some pretty important things here today in this conversation.
And we talk about Marvel like every day. So
yeah,
we really sit in our offices and talk about all of our ideas about the movies. And we figured, hey, why not invite you all into our office hours and into our conversation?
Right. So every week from now on, we're going to be having these conversations, bringing you into what some of our main thoughts are about the MCU moving forward, the various projects, different rumors that we have going on in the community. See if we can nail anything down before these get premiered.
And we are researchers by trade. So we're going to kind of frame our conversations in our office hours, research questions and hypotheses.
That's right. So we're going to be moving through some big questions today that we have on the front of our mind when we look at Quantumania and to see what is coming next. Now, we watch a bunch of channels on YouTube. We watch a bunch of different rumors happening in the community, but we don't necessarily believe and agree with everything everyone is already saying. So today we're going to address what some of our viewpoints are and explore some areas that maybe haven't gotten a lot of attention so far. So to start off for us today, the big question that we want to move through, research question one, if you will, how did Kang even get stuck in the quantum realm to begin with? There's a lot of theories, a lot of possibilities here. We each have a couple that we want to talk through. So Malcolm, what do you think? How did Kang get stuck in the quantum realm?
All right, I have two things for you. And I'm going to tie them together. So
all right, let's start with the first one.
First thing, Janet Van Dyne, lovely Miss Janet. We know that she was trapped in the quantum realm for years, right? That was the whole plot of the second movie, Ant-Man and the Wasp. Janet, in her travels, in her whatever journey through the quantum realm, I believe encountered Sir Kang. And encountering Sir Kang, I think that she worked with him for a while on some scientific things, realized that, hey, this guy is really a creep. He's a conqueror. He's a jerk, which is a quote directly from Loki.
Sure.
Somebody called him a jerk at some point, and I believe it may have been Miss Janet. And she decides that he's dangerous. And she does something, she takes something that leaves him trapped in the quantum realm. That is my claim.
I got a couple of questions for you about that, okay?
Go ahead.
If that is what's true, if it was Janet who got him stuck there, why didn't she tell anybody? We know at the end of Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, when she comes back, right before her, Hank, all of them were blipped, she was actively helping Scott go back to the quantum realm. Why would she be helping him even explore that realm, even continue research in that realm, if she believed and understood that there was Kang the Conqueror, or even just a dangerous man trapped in the quantum realm that could accidentally get free?
All right.
Why wouldn't she tell them? Yeah, hit me with it.
All right. Why do we go to zoos when there are dangerous lions and other dangerous animals there? Because they are contained in a certain area. All right. Outside of that area, it's safe. We are here at LSU. There is a live tiger on campus. We should be worried when we go to our cars because there is a dangerous animal on campus. However, it's confined. All right. So we know from the trailers that Kang describes the place where he is as a prison. All right. So as long as Kang is confined to what I'm going to call Chronopolis, because that's just that's what I'm doing. I'm calling it the town that from the comics Kang rules over. While he's in Chronopolis, he's a danger to no one. I think she's overestimating his being trapped, and I think it gives her a sense of security.
Now, I really like your zoo example, because I do think that's a pretty good qualification, right? The quantum realm being zoo, maybe the specific exhibit being whatever bubble, whether it be Chronopolis or whatever else that we want to call where Kang is stuck. But the thing is, if I take my kid to the zoo, I'm going to tell them not to go in with the lions. Like, we have that conversation. And so if Janet is allowing, whether it be Scott or maybe Cassie, to go into the quantum realm to explore it, even just to do research on it, to not preempt that with some type of warning just really doesn't make sense for me. And if that's the answer the movie gives us, I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to be completely satisfied with that.
Yeah, and I also don't know that those conversations didn't happen because we haven't had screen time with this group of people since
Fair.
the post-credit scene when they were blipped, right? They haven't all been together on screen for us.
Right.
Didn't really happen in Endgame. So maybe a part of what we get in the story is a look back because we have dialogue, which doesn't have to be tied to what we've seen in the trailers, where he was like, he's not worried about Kang, or Kang's problem is not his problem. That could have been the moment Janet did tell him, hey, there's this guy in the quantum realm and he's pretty dangerous. And they're like, whatever.
Well, so we watched a clip here. We watched a clip here a few minutes ago, kind of building on that, where Scott literally meets Kang, like in person, face to face. And he says, who are you, dude? Like, he doesn't know who Kang is. And so if Janet had, before they got into the situation, whether it be, you know, right after the blip, whether it be right before they got here, had she at any point mentioned, hey, there's a scary guy in the quantum realm, wouldn't that stick out for Scott?
Maybe, but he would have to tie it together. So scary guy in the quantum realm, and then meeting this stranger, maybe it didn't connect.
The man that has him in a prison cage. is that not a scary guy?
that is very scary to me. But also, like, I can see Scott having this unwarranted confidence because of his celebrity, right?
Yeah.
A regular Earth timeline here where, like, he even says, you made a big mistake, I'm an Avenger. Like, he's thinking very highly of himself, which might lead him to like downplay everything.
No, I'm going to ask you a slightly different question, because, like, to me, when it comes to Janet, this might be the more important one for me. If Janet was in the quantum realm with Kang at all, Kang the Conqueror, if she laid eyes on him in the quantum realm, wouldn't he have already been stuck there? Why is he not out conquering? Why is he? How would Janet be responsible for keeping him there if he was already there? Right? Because if we go into the assumption they kind of want us to believe where she was helping him build a time trap, helping him try to get out of there, we already inherent that he was stuck there to begin with to even be able to meet Janet. And as we know in our timeline, right before the events of Loki, he who remains was the only Kang that is, you know, out and functioning theoretically in our world, like outside of the quantum realm, that's not imprisoned. He is in charge of all time. If that's the case, this Kang would have had to already be stuck there. He is not being stuck there after the fact. So how could Janet be responsible for it?
Okay, so I know I said I had 2 points, but let's call them connected point 1 and point 2, because I don't think Janet is alone in this. So what happens, all right, just stick with me here. All right, what I think happens is that Kang actually was not trapped by another Kang or just by Janet, but that he was trapped in the quantum realm by a group of superheroes, one of whom we've seen in Multiverse of Madness. Yes, I'm referring to the Fantastic Four. All right.
Okay.
I believe that the Fantastic Four originally battled with Kang and trapped him in the quantum realm. I think in her travels of the quantum realm, Janet comes across Kang. He presents himself as just this regular guy, which he can do, and she's helping him to develop the thing he needs to get out. And then she realizes what she's doing, and she either steals the power source for it and throws it away, or does something to deactivate the thing so that he can't actually use it. But she was helping him. So instead of her originally trapping him, she's kind of making him remain trapped, which would also make him angry.
Yes, it would. Yes, it would.
Almost going to get out. So
I really,
that's it.
I know we're going to move on to the Fantastic Four. I really struggle to understand why Janet is so important. And like that, you know, I hate saying that Michelle Pfeiffer's fantastic. but Janet Van Dyne does not feel like the most pivotal character to me in order to be able to have her have that relationship with Kang to any degree. I think that honestly, I think that all of that's like a misnomer. I'm kind of with you on the Fantastic Four. I'm excited to hear where you go with that here in a second. When it comes to Janet, I think she probably just dated Krylar, like Lord Krylar. I don't know if she, you know, Bill Murray and Michelle Pfeiffer would be fantastic on screen. I can see some funny dialogue between, between Hank and Krylar potentially, both funny guys. But we've talked about this a good bit with Ant-Man too. Like, why is he so important to begin with? And that's something we can come back to. But when it comes to Janet, I don't know how helpful she could have even been. But I think you might be onto something with the Fantastic Four.
But can I go back
What's
to
up?
just a second before we
Yeah,
move
yeah,
forward?
yeah.
So do you think then Janet could have been working on whatever it was Kang needed by proxy through Krylar, through Bill Murray's character?
I would believe that so much more because it fundamentally doesn't make sense to me that she wouldn't have a conversation with Scott, with Hank, with, and like, she could have not, but it wouldn't make sense to me that she would not have those conversations. It wouldn't make sense to me that she allows any type of, quantum research to happen near her if she's as afraid of it as they make her seem. And we know Marvel does this in trailers where they give us some level of misdirection. And I think that that's a lot of what's happening, right? I think we get lines like Kang can rewrite timelines, like in these trailers. But I think that might be something she's learning in the quantum realm when she goes back with everyone. She may have heard a lore about him before. She may have heard things from Krylar, but I certainly don't think that Janet really believes that there's any level of truth to that because we don't know her character too well. That is very fair. But if what they want to present to us now is, she's, sending a signal to the quantum realm, turn it off. Like it's this terrifying thing that has to be warranted in some way. And it's just going to be really hard for me to accept that as an answer from them. And I know that very, that might really truly be what I have to come to terms with, but it just doesn't feel, I feel like I could write it better. That's the truth. I feel like I could write something better than that.
But
If
I
it
am
just comes
so
down to
ready.
Janet kept a secret.
I'm so ready to accept that. I just think that with our
Yeah.
timeline, we haven't, again, like I said before, we haven't had a lot of screen time with Janet, and this is going to have to fill in the. So a part of, I think, where you're going with this is like, she should have told them, she should have known, we should have heard about, but we haven't had an opportunity to hear that yet. I know we had a whole phase, but like their story wasn't focused on in that phase.
Right. But if she did tell them about it, why the heck would Cassie be developing this technology now? More importantly, though, if we think back to the post credit of Ant-Man and the Wasp, she is actively helping send Scott back into the quantum realm, and we can understand that there is a difference, between him being trapped in Chronopolis, perhaps in the quantum realm at large. But we don't know what's going to happen in the quantum realm. And like even thinking about what her scenes are in that movie, at no point does she truly seem distressed. At no point when she gets into Hank's little spaceship, and she's like, "We have to go." She seemed like just happy to see her husband again. We don't see any signs of distress, and like it's possible for them to rewrite that and tell us, "Oh, she was fleeing, she was this," but I don't think she was, terrified her whole time in there. She didn't seem like in a rush to get out. It just happened to.
My zoo example comes in because I think she just thought he was trapped, no way to get out. Like if she
then
was
why, if that's the truth, then why is she so scared now?
Because now, yeah. So I think there's a difference between sending like Scott into the quantum realm, because technically they all went through the quantum realm when they, did the time heist thing, right? They used quantum. I think there's a difference between that and her sending communication signals, right, to the quantum realm. I don't know what that thing is. And I also don't think they knew what she was working on because she was explaining what it did. And when she said she was sending signals, that's when they got concerned.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's a problem with doing anything with the quantum realm, but the signals she was sending, I don't know that full conversation. She might have said, I got correspondence back, because we do get the line that if she had that, she would have been able to save her father. So that means it's a two communication, right?
Yeah.
And maybe whatever that is concerned her. I'm not sure exactly.
Yeah. I just really struggle with Janet being important to the story. And we have a lot of other theories we're going to talk about. And I think that they are far more compelling to me than to really believe that Janet does this. Because we're already in a movie where it seems very improbable that Ant-Man is as important as he is, right? And he is. And I think there's a lot of really interesting reasons behind that go all the way back. Like we've watched Ant-Man be, the reason time travel ends up getting invented, right? Like he comes back because a rat stepped on a keyboard, and like these very small things that should never have happened. And now he is, in the musical, and he has a podcast, and all of this success, which just doesn't feel super appropriate, really, given the context. But it is the fortune that he has stumbled into. And I think that's something else that we will have to come to terms with in this movie. And I know you and I have talked about that on a slightly different note. But like the only thing that reminds me of or seems similar to is the pitch that He Who Remains makes to Loki, right? Where he's saying, I will give you all this power if you go back in this timeline, if you go back and do this thing for me, or if you take charge and put you guys on the timeline together. And looking at Ant-Man's success, it doesn't feel natural or normal. It feels like there's some level of intervention in it, which is a whole different like can of worms to unpack. But I bring that up because now at the point where Janet is also this huge pivotal character, it feels like they have to do a lot more explaining to make that believable than they would if they just went with another story or another actor here.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but she's like literally our only link to the quantum realm. She's the only person who spent time there and would have encountered all these people. Like, I mean, I know that Scott was trapped, but we know Janet was living off the land, right? She was like a part of their civilization.
Why do we have to have a pre-established connection to Kang though? Why does Janet have had to meet him? Why does she need to know him?
I think it motivates the story why he chooses Ant-Man. He has to at some point he has
because of Janet,
because of their crew. So we don't know that necessarily like he was, so fixated on Janet or this person, but if he knows that they're all together and learns a little bit more about them, because he could have spies, like maybe they landed somewhere else and somebody told him about these people who made it in. Because the bigger question is, well, how in the heck, if he's in a prison, do they get in and out? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
So we can talk about that at later, but yeah.
I don't know. So yeah. Well, I think that segues pretty well to the point you were talking about the Fantastic Four, right? Is if Janet, and I think I would believe a little more that maybe she was working to try to help get out of the quantum realm. Maybe it was with Kang. I don't like it if it was, but maybe she was working with Krylar on something to try to get out of the realm. But I could see a world where perhaps the Fantastic Four did trap him there. Because what that does, I say him, there could be multiple Kangs. We'll get to that. But when we look at when we look at getting trapped in the quantum, what that would do inherently is establish a really high power level for the Fantastic Four that we know we're going to be meeting at the start of Phase 6. Because we would, Kevin Feige said we're not going to get the origin story for them, so maybe we get some level of lore presented in this film. I don't know. Do you think we would actually see the Fantastic Four on screen, or how do you think that would play out if that was the case?
It's a possibility, or maybe it's not as much a possibility. The Fantastic Four, whether or not we see them, like if the actors have been casted, will be present somehow in this movie. And I think that they're integral to this story, and that this movie is integral to how you incorporate them. Because I've been wondering ever since they announced they're going to do the movie, and it's not coming out until Phase 6, so close to Secret Wars. Yeah. How are you going to drop the Fantastic Four on us like that? They're too big of a deal, too integral to like the Secret Wars story for us to just get them a couple movies before, right? Right. And there's been a lot of people who have guessed that they're trapped somewhere in the quantum realm. I am one of those people who has said that, and I think what I'm going to say is still there, right? If we go back like a year when we first learned the date of Quantumania, et cetera, and people started to speculate about what the movie's about, there were rumors that the Fantastic Four would appear here. And I think rumors come from somewhere. There's some level of truth in those rumors. So while they may not appear in the film, I think they're a part of the story in the film. And the way they will appear to us is because they are a part of the original conflict that traps Kang in the quantum realm. So we think of this universal war between the Kangs as like He Who Remains personally trapped somebody everywhere. But Kang is more manipulative than that. So he didn't have to actually do it himself. It just had to be done, right? And cause something to happen. So if this particular Kang the Conqueror, and we know that this is Kang the Conqueror because they're calling him Kang, the Conqueror. You hear all of battled the Fantastic Four at some point, future or past, because it doesn't matter. The Fantastic Four technically could be a team from the future that then gets brought into the main timeline now.
Right. Well, and when we're in the quantum realm, we're existing outside of time. Right? Like we know that from Loki. We know that from, even just like Scott's misadventures, the 5 hours versus 5 years situation is we know time is operating very differently. So yeah, they could be from anywhere in the timeline.
Yeah, and I say that because we know we got that line from Doctor Strange and Multiverse of Madness, you charted in the 60s, which makes everybody think that they existed before. And but it's curious as to why we've never heard of them and nobody's mentioned them. And it could be because they're from the future, right?
Ooh,
so
which would make sense, which would make a lot of sense of that line in the trailer where Kang's like, I will burn them out of time. Like they were literally burnt out of our timeline, if that's the case.
Yes, and I think they're the ones who trapped him, but it was like a sacrifice type of deal in the fight that they got trapped somewhere else in the quantum realm. Because this Chronopolis, it exists in the bubble. That is my belief. I strongly believe it because of in Ant-Man and the Wasp, the second film. Did that have a subtitle? Because I'm confusing myself.
No, it was, first one was just Ant-Man, second one was Ant-Man and the Wasp.
And this one is Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. We're just going to refer to this always as Quantumania only. So Ant-Man and the Wasp, when they're leaving the quantum realm, we see a city in the background. And the city we see in these previews looks different, but that was 6 years ago when they made that film. So yes, they made some adjustments to the visual effects and how they want it to look, etc. But I think they purposefully showed us, because she was near it, this city in a bubble. All right. And that bubble is his prison. And I think that is how the Fantastic Four trapped him. They were fighting, set off some device, and it put like almost like a force field around him.
So I'm just going to immediately clarify like a way that you and I just really disagree about this film. I think that we are going to meet many more than one personas of Kang. And I'm using that word persona intentionally, right? Like it could be the same Kang at multiple points in the timeline. Either way, it would present itself to us as like different versions of the character. And so when we look at things like the Chronopolis, which is what we saw, I would agree is what we saw in Ant-Man and the Wasp, just because it looks a lot like the comic city. It looks very different than what we saw as He Who Remains, Citadel at the end of time. It looks very different than what we see now in Quantumania. And I don't think that that is an accident. Marvel's very intentional, even, since the beginning of the types of things that they make as Easter eggs. So to give us something as big as like Kang's homestead and change the look of it for no, I don't see that as possible. What I do see maybe as many versions of Kang being stuck in different bubbles down there. We've talked about it when we look at the design of this particular, realm bubble that we're seeing in Quantumania. Is the sides, like the walls, kind of build up, and it looks like the things are trapped in with similar technology that our sorcerers use. I'm not saying I think it's sorcerer magic. I'm not exactly sure what it could be, but it looks like there's some type of enchantment around the rim of it, and it looks very different in color scheme and design, all of the things. Than what we've seen before. And I think it could be because maybe even just in that zone, maybe there are multiple Kangs thrown there, or maybe there's just different Kangs trapped throughout the quantum realm. And we're going to get to some of my pitches in a minute, but I think it would make a lot of sense for He Who Remains to have left all of these different people, because it also would be somewhat of an efficient way to end the multiversal war, to just throw all of these people into a space. And we know in Loki, when they are
pruning.
What's the word for it? Yeah, when they're pruning entire timelines, they're moving them to the end of time, which we get to see for a little bit, and we get to see what Elias looks like. And Elias really is just repurposing that matter there, or he's acting like a guard dog for Kang City, or his citadel rather. And to think about that pruning process, what it means to move an entire timeline to a space. What if what happened to get him stuck there to begin with is it's just these timelines being thrown in? And we saw in What If what it looks like when an entire reality collapses, right? And we saw Doctor Strange sit in that little ball, that little orb at the end. What if this is just a bigger version of that, where maybe it was, all of these different realities, maybe it was the old battle world, maybe, I don't have all the answers to it, but what if it was just pruning of those Kang's realities and trapping them in the quantum realm until they're needed? We had Elias as a guard dog. What if this was just Immortus's, or not necessarily Immortus, but He Who Remains guard dog situation? He just threw them all into the quantum realm, the giant zoo, if you will.
So we've gone from Janet helping Kang and then keeping him trapped because he was trapped by the Fantastic Four, and now we're saying that this was a part of He Who Remains contingency plan.
Yeah, so that is, I'll be honest, that's my number one pitch in terms of what I think has happened here. And I love the last episode of Loki so much. I've seen episode 6 over 50 times, like easily, hands down. Because I truly think it's an incredible episode. And I think Kevin Feige, in the writing team behind Loki, was very intentional in the message that they send to us, right? We have to see the full journey unfold before we'll understand the destination, before we have to get in the right mindset to finish the quest, right? And I think that that's what's happening for us right now. And he's being so sure, right? Like, of course I'm going to come back. He knows time, he understands it, but it would also make sense to me if that was because he knew that him dying would allow these other Kangs to get out of the quantum realm because of the events that would unfold if he's not there to stop it.
2
I don't
points.
know, that is, yeah, please.
All right. Or 2 questions for you. I guess
Okay.
the first I'll start with is Kang didn't know he was going to die, right? Because that happened at the other end of the threshold. So he didn't know what was going to happen. And I guess a contingency plan is because of blah, blah, blah. But to me, like, he wouldn't have known that. So
Is that the question? Okay.
Yeah, it would have been a guess, right? I don't know.
Well, so the way that would function is, you know, he has 2 options if he doesn't know what's going to happen. Either he's going to stay alive and be in charge, or he's not going to stay alive or not be in charge. At the point where he's staying alive, contingency plan doesn't matter. They're still in the quantum realm. They're still down there in the little prison. At the point where he dies, he knows they're going to get out. He knows they're going to be there. Or even if he's just not in charge, right? If he's not there to manage the flow of time, the alternative to that is these Kangs are able to get out of their prison, and he knows inevitably he will be in charge again. And I think it does potentially mirror what we see happen with Immortus in the comics, which is why I keep making that like little slip up in terms of He Who Remains versus Immortus. So we know he's not called He Who Remains in the comic, that's a different character. But when we look at the Immortus storyline, and how, you know, he's Iron Lad visited by a version in the future, goes through, you know, we could unpack the whole story here, but at the end of the day, it would make sense to me because that's a character that has some sense of inevitability. He knows what his future is going to be, even if he tries his whole life to not become that. Kang is a story of inevitability. It is becoming that anyway because it's a fixed point in time. And so if he understands that because it's already happened for him, and we're seeing that Kang, He Who Remains, at a later point in his timeline, it would make sense why he is so calm about it. Right? He's like, oh, like, yeah, I can die, reincarnation, no worries. I'm already here in the quantum realm. I'm going to develop this way. I will eventually come here. And we know that there have been theories talking about how maybe what we're going to see in phase 5 is He Who Remains rise to power kind of unfold. And I think that this could very well be that. I hope that if that's the case, we get a lot of, you know, a lot of information in the Kang Dynasty movie where we get to actually see that happen in more interesting ways, and all of a sudden here's He Who Remains again. But I think it could be really compelling and kind of explain how he was so sure.
Okay, so my second point to you then.
Yeah.
Let me remember what my first one was so I can say my second.
Sure.
was his dialogue. Okay, was him not knowing what was happening after. I was about to call it the liminal space, but the threshold. That was it, the threshold. Now I want to point to something that's reliable and unreliable at the same time. The dialogue we hear in the trailers, right?
Okay, yeah.
As we get more trailers, we get more context for the dialogue, and it changes what we understand the dialogue to mean. But he says, they trapped me here, and he was going to burn them out of time. If your theory were true, He Who Remains would have been responsible for it, and that's a single person. Here, he seems to refer to a group of people. What you got for me now?
Council of Kangs. And the two are not mutually exclusive, right? So like we saw in Loki, we saw the statues. There were 4 statues in the Citadel. 3 of them smashed, 1 left. I would be of the belief that the one that's left is probably He Who Remains. The other 3 may have been the rest of the council. And it would make sense to me that maybe that Council of Kangs left, trapped him there, and then He Who Remains trapped the rest of them there and said it's only room for one. Kang does not like to share power. Council of Kangs are, you know, interactive throughout the comics. I think we're definitely going to get a version of that. I do not think we'll get a full version of that in this movie by any means. I think they're probably going to save that for Kang Dynasty, which is a great choice. It's a big reveal. I know there have been rumors though so far. You were talking about rumors as well when it comes to like a post-credit scene of maybe us seeing a Council of Kangs and getting upset. You know, like, oh, somebody else took down our Kang. Oh, we have to be upset here. We trapped him there. And if there is any weight to that, I still think He Who Remains may be the driving force behind that it's the same character at an earlier point in his timeline, you know, developing in that way. But I definitely think that we have a real chance at a Council of Kangs. So that satisfies the they, keeps He Who Remains involved. And it would make a lot of sense as well as we, you know, as we think about the ending of this movie, which is, you know, another question that we'll unpack here in a minute about what could happen if there really is that post-credit scene where there is a council, it would almost work, it would work really well to support this point, if that makes sense.
It makes sense. 2 points. The
Yeah.
first is, do you think then that this Kang will be presented to us as the most dangerous Kang? Volatile, mean, whatever. Like he's the worst of the worst.
Do you mean, do I think that's how he's going to be presented in this movie or in the context that we will continue to get?
In this movie and the context that we'll continue to get. Like this is the worst version of him.
Yeah, well, I mean, today Michelle Pfeiffer had an interview where she said this is the best version of himself. And I think this may be, you know, Kang at his most angry. You know, he's a conqueror. He's been trapped in this realm for however long. I don't know if this will end up being our big bad or not. Because I think if this character, I don't know, it would feel like Kang is so spread throughout time. There's so many versions of this persona. And for us to get the biggest, baddest one right away would potentially undercut future stories they tell. Granted, we don't know what's going to happen in the Marvels with other elements. I don't think we're just going to follow one Kang through the story, though, because that really doesn't do service to how interesting this character is. And when I say the story, I don't mean just in Quantumania. I mean in terms of phase 5 and phase 6. They have to give us more versions of the character in order to be who Kang is, like foundationally as a character. And I don't know, do you swing with your biggest punch first? What do you think?
I think we might be getting the most dangerous Kang, but I think they all have things that make them all dangerous, right? But this one may be the most violent. So like, I didn't really see He Who Remains as a violent character. But he's dangerous in his own right. And they had acknowledged that in Loki.
Yeah.
This might be the most like physical. We even see this Kang like muscles ripped fighting. This is like,
oh yeah, we do.
So like I think this is the more physical aspect of Kang. And when they say persona, that makes sense too. If we have the one who's like this weird genius, and then we have the other one, they're all smart, but then we have the other one who's more like the playground bully type of fisticuffs. Where did that come from? I don't.
Fisticuffs is it's fighting,
like
physical
I know
fighting.
what fisticuffs are, but who says?
Well, debaters, we do. So welcome to my world. Welcome to my world.
But I think, yes. So I do think that this is like our most volatile, violent Kang. And then we'll get other versions who are other things.
So if I'm right here, and I think I am, when we look at like the comic book origin story of the Immortus Iron Lad situation, he was taken, you know, Iron Lad as a young Nathaniel Richards is visited by an older version of himself, King the Conqueror. And then he's warned never love, and then he ends up going with him on like a time adventures, right? Essentially, Kang locks this man in prehistoric times, back with the dinosaurs, for a year. He has a year until the meteorite comes down, destroys everything, and in that time, Kang is asked to learn to survive, essentially. And this is when, in the comics, he is really becoming that conqueror, right? He's really getting those physical skills, learning how to win in those physical brawls, you know, man versus nature, in this case, man versus dinosaur. And I think we could get a version of that, only instead of prehistoric time, maybe we're trapping him in the quantum realm for that reason. Was another thought experiment that I've had.
That sounds right. So him having to survive all this time, and we don't know how long he's been down in the quantum realm.
Yeah.
Because I think we always think of Kang as like the past till now, but like the future. But even in Loki, we're at the Citadel at the end of time, and he says eons ago, this thing happened. All right. So like our concept of time is going to have to be really flexible. I like what you're saying there. That makes sense.
Yeah. And that for me builds the idea of it being He Who Remains or Immortus, if they were separate or the same or whatever, being the one responsible for putting him down here. Because if it was used in a similar capacity, where it was even any of the Kangs where it said, hey, I'm going to trap you down here. You're going to have to learn how to conquer. You're going to have to get these skills, and you're going to get pissed off. It guarantees that cycle, right? Because it guarantees that the Kang that gets out of the quantum realm is going to be mad and is going to start that war again. And that He Who Remains may end up back at the end because he knows he wins the multiversal war. If he knows how the multiversal war starts and can guarantee the start to that, then he guarantees his victory, as long as it starts in the same way. And He Who Remains seems to believe that it's going to be him at the end of time. And the only way he can have that guarantee, even when he's not in control, is to guarantee that it's going to start the same way.
Okay. Well,
Does that
before
make sense? Because we're doing timey-wimey conversation here. I know,
that makes
wibbly
sense to
wobbly,
me.
timey-wimey.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And before we transition, I do want to point one thing out based off of
Yeah.
what I said to support your point. The they being the Council of the King or
Yeah,
whoever,
yeah, yeah.
that they also could refer to a group of 4 people who are fantastic. That's all I want to
Sure.
say.
It absolutely can. It absolutely could. And I
All right.
think those are, I'm fine with either direction of that. If it's Janet, I'm gonna be mad though. If it's
But
like, this was so mad. Because they can't give me that answer. I will be so mad.
yeah, yeah. I think she's a part of it though, but I think it's the Fantastic. Okay. Fantastic Four or
Okay.
Council of Kangs. Either way, my man is stuck. So
Now, something you
uh,
brought up a minute ago though that I really want to ask you about that last episode of Loki. What was the threshold? Because he says like, oh, that's the threshold. I don't know anymore. I said, what was it? Because we've seen moments, and if you play the audio clip of WandaVision at the same time, people are the rumor is that, oh, it was Wanda becoming the Scarlet Witch. That's our Nexus event. That's the threshold. Could be that. Could be a lot of other a lot of other scenes as well, from other shows, other movies. Would not be anything that we've seen at all. What do you think the threshold was?
um, let's see. I have no clue. Literally, I have no clue because it's like when he says we approach the threshold, that has to mean that whatever happens after that particular point in time has never happened before. And the whole thing we're supposed to believe is that like the timeline is in this loop. It's a loop of things that have happened or are happening, but the end of time would signify that it's the end of those events. All right. So we're at this nexus point, or what I don't want to call it a nexus point because that means something, but this point which like history has not been recorded.
So if that is the case, this is wild. This is me thinking of this right here. What if it's because whatever the event was, the threshold, didn't happen in the timeline, but it happened in the quantum realm? What if we see the threshold here in Quantumania? What if that's the thing? Because this movie, we don't know exactly when it takes place in the timeline yet. We do not know. We can have theories, we have ideas based on trailers, but even that they can always do a before after. They can throw us anywhere.
But
But because we know timelines.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Because it's
Yeah,
happening in the quantum realm, I don't even think it matters. It could be
yeah.
squarely within what our timeline as we know it. This is 3 years after the blip or wherever we are right now. But because it's in the quantum realm, there's a way for it to impact any point in time.
And I would agree with that. But if that's the case, and if we agree with that, then why do we think that it would even possibly be something from a timeline, from any timeline, that would be a threshold? Right? Because like you said, we see time visualized as a circle, as something that is not interrupted. And so it's unchanging when it's in that circle.
So
We
since you
do
brought it,
during that moment in Loki, we do have the TVA still functioning, still enforcing his will. Whether or not they should be, I don't know, but they are in quantum time, right? And I'm gonna call it quantum time because there's still some kind of order and event. Like we know a conversation's happening, it's unfolding in a certain way. It just exists outside of that main structure of time. And so, what do you think about the idea of potentially a threshold event being anything in the quantum realm, whether it be from this movie or maybe something else we've seen?
I'm going to drop something and then I want us to just let it marinate and sit and we don't have to talk about it.
Okay.
But we don't know what our girl Ravonna is going to do. And if we trust
Mm.
the timeline of the show, that the events we see happen in that order, she literally left the TVA before that threshold moment happened, if I'm not mistaken. Or was it right after? Simultaneously? I want to
I'm gonna
say
find out right now.
before that scene where the threshold happens, but with instructions from He Who Remains. So whatever it is she went to go do could have been the thing that causes it if we're going that direction.
I absolutely love that idea. Because I think Ravonna has to be a central player to this story. She is a central part of everything that happens with Kang in the comic. Like we talked about Immortus and Iron Lad. When the older version of Kang is going back to Iron Lad to warn the younger version himself, what he's warning the younger version is never love. Don't love, because he's watched, like the Kang version has watched Ravonna die in front of him over and over and over, and he views that love as his weakness, right? And then the young version of Kang here, Iron Lad, grows up and like he doesn't, you know, he's aware of, he's heard all of these stories about Ravonna dying over and over and over, and he still can't stop himself because he doesn't want to become this like cruel version of Kang. So he still has love in his life, and it manifests differently. But Ravonna in every story of Kang is central to the story, and you know, a lot of his motivating factor as a character is to try to find her and find a version of her that he can be with and a version of her that he can love. And you know, in the comics, we see that unfold as him meeting her in 1,000 different ways and her dying each time, or meeting her and getting rejected by her. One time he gets rejected and even tries to kill her. Like, you know, we have all of those variations, which is, you know, similar to what we see kind of happening in What If as well. We see that happening with the Doctor Strange character as he's chasing his love, and we watch his universe literally collapse. There could be any number of versions of it, but I think one way or another, Ravonna has to be tied to his story, whether it is we hear about her or we see her on screen. Do you think we're going to see Ravonna in this
film? I mean, I think it's just like we could see anybody anywhere doing anything this movie.
Yeah.
But I'm not expecting that to happen. That's just like me trying to protect my heart, because Marvel has broken my heart once or twice in Phase 4 with my expectations. But I think it's very possible. Like, they're in the quantum realm, and we assume, because there's no confirmation, that the TVA is also in a similar space area region. Right. So any of those characters could technically pop up. And what if He Who Remains sent Ravonna to meet his other self, right?
Yeah. You know? Well, and I did just pull up that scene that we were talking about. She did leave before that threshold moment.
Yeah.
And so for me, if anything, that adds a lot of weight to what you're saying here about the possibility
of her. She was in search of free will. She was in search of free will. And what is the whole thing that He Who Remains is trying to avoid? And the whole thing, I'm about to say Sylvie. Where did Libby come?
Liddy.
I think it was Sylvie and Loki together gave me Libby.
I love it.
was talking about how can you take free will away from people. So if Ravonna's in search of free will, right, maybe she sees what she gets and it breaks. It causes that moment, right? Free will causes the moment where we pass the threshold.
Oh yeah, it's possible. Man, I don't know, but I do think that the threshold could have something to do with her. I think it's a really good point that you made about the timing of her leaving right before that conversation. And I'm looking at the timeline order for us right now. I'm not sure how much of it really matters when we're talking about things outside of time or not. But they do still have Loki directly after Endgame and right before What If. And what that does to me, at least, to see Loki placed at the start of that timeline is let us really question everything that comes after, right? So like everything in Phase 4, with my understanding of this, is happening after He Who Remains has already died. And it, I have to say after, again, we're talking about time in a weird way, but for Loki to be so early in the timeline order really does allude to me that anything that's allowed to happen after that was not the plan of TVA.
Yeah. And another random thing that I don't want us to have a conversation about. But
okay,
it's
no conversation.
And it's just something you brought up made me think of it when you were talking about how the shows were placed. We got WandaVision first. And there was this thing on the fact that she was a Nexus being, but it never, like, it got overshadowed by the fact that she was the Scarlet Witch. And we never quite went back to that or what the implications of that were for a multiverse.
Well, we did in Multiverse of Madness. And so what they talk about there, I know it's your favorite movie. We talk about what makes our Wanda a Nexus being is that there's one Scarlet Witch. There's a Wanda in every universe, a Wanda in every multiverse, but there's only one Scarlet Witch, and that's our 616 Wanda. The parallel to that we know is like there's a Darkhold in every universe. Great. There's only one Book of Vishanti. Kind of like how there's only one America Chavez. And so yeah, so I'm not sure how to better explain that, but the part of it being a big special event in our timeline is because that is the only Scarlet Witch in the entire multiverse.
So my understanding based off of WandaVision of a Nexus being was that they are consistent throughout the multiverse. You know what I mean? Like,
right. No, and I hear you. And when we talk about Nexus events, that's how we talk about them. So perhaps, but if I'm I'm not wrong, Multiverse of Madness is pretty good job telling us that she is the only Scarlet Witch in our timeline.
That could very well be it, but I don't know. It doesn't gel to me with my understanding of the Nexus being from their show.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Trying to pull it up. Nexus being MCU, but like, yeah. Nexus
What is
beings are
a
pure individual entities. This is the Marvel fandom, which we often rely on. Wiki's not a resource. Yes, it is today. Nexus beings are rare individual entities with the ability to affect probability and thus the future, thereby altering the flow of the universal time stream. What did I just say?
Oh, yeah. Okay, well, it's the exact opposite of what we were saying. The Nexus event in Loki, when they talk about it, is the thing that sets them apart and is different, starts a new timeline, right? Because Sylvie's asking, well, what was your Nexus event? And like Loki asked that when he's with all the other variants of himself. And it's like, oh, well, I killed Thor. I did this. My next. So the Nexus event is the one thing that's different. So in our world, for Wanda to be a Nexus being, she is the one. It's the special version.
So let me read a little bit more?
Yeah.
These beings, each referred to as a nexus, act as the keystones of the multiverse and are crucial to its ultimate coherence and stability. Nexus beings are vigilantly watched over by cosmic forces such as the TVA and the Timekeepers to be aware of any temporal changes that the nexi, oh, I'm glad I caught that word, may cause to the time stream and act accordingly.
Yeah. So the way I looked up specifically the difference. There is a difference between Nexus being and Nexus event. A Nexus being is a rare individual entity with the ability to affect probability and thus the future by altering the flow of the universal time stream. So a Nexus being would be our individuals like the Scarlet Witch or Enchantress, aka Sylvie, that have the ability to create all of these diverging timelines. And some of them are allowed, some of them are not allowed. And if we know WandaVision, maybe her becoming the Scarlet Witch was a Nexus event. Now he doesn't know what's going to happen because she became the Scarlet Witch, or happens after the fact, then we know that Wanda is going to be creating diverging timelines.
Okay. And this backs up, I believe, what you are saying now. I'm going to skip down. Nexus beings also have the potential to produce unbelievably powerful offspring, as it was mentioned. That any born of the Scarlet Witch, Nexus being of 616, would be powerful enough to stand against the great forces of the universe and rock the cosmos itself. And now that's very particular, and a reason why they would want why our Wanda doesn't have children. Like, she makes the point in the movie. Now we're just getting way off. No, we're not. Because it ties together.
It's all related. It's all one world. Yeah.
It's related. Like, they make the point of saying that only our Wanda doesn't have children. And what you're saying is what makes our Wanda special is that hex power, her being the Scarlet Witch. She's not the Scarlet Witch in any other multiverse, but she's the Scarlet Witch in ours, and she cannot have children because they would be too powerful.
Yeah.
Each Nexus being supposedly has a power unique to themselves. Hers is hex power, despite having the potential to change probability. So, yeah. Oh, no Nexus beings include, give me this, Scarlet Witch. I'm just going to say the ones that I think are relevant. Merlin. Well, that's a side conversation for us to have. The Conqueror and Franklin Richards and Jean Grey. And we know that our Jean Grey, becomes the Phoenix. So like, that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think there are a lot of ways that we can touch on that. Again, I think they've not done the best job. The fact that we're even having this conversation when we have been as like in the weeds as we are and still having to clarify a little bit between Nexus being and Nexus event, that's on them. That's on them for not giving us the most like clear-cut version of it. But I definitely think that makes sense as far as what we're saying here.
Yeah. So what do we think? Well, maybe not what this has to do with, but how will Quantumania end? What are we thinking is going to happen? So we have our theories about how he's trapped, but what's going to happen?
He's going to get out, right? Like he's
going to
get out. Yeah. I mean, not everybody believes that. There are people that think that like maybe Ant-Man and them will get stuck in there with him again, and then we'll have other Kangs come out into our universe. I don't believe that. I think that this particular Kang is going to get out. I think he is going to go straight to the people that made him mad. We talked about earlier how the Marvels might be related to this. I think that could be what we set up next in a scene. So when we talk about why Kang is upset to begin with, right? Who trapped him there? We also have to talk about who destroyed his own timeline. And in the comics, in certain versions of it, it is the Scroll. So specifically, you were telling me earlier, like a conflict that happens here in the 21st century with the Scroll, or not the Scroll, the Kree. And so if it
Scroll
is,
and the Kree, it's them fighting each other.
Oh, well, perfect. If it is some battle there, it would make sense to me why he would show up in the next movie. Because I don't think we're going to get a single film, whether it be the Marvels to the Thunderbolts to whatever, that doesn't relate to Kang, whether it be directly or indirectly. And if he showed up in the Marvels, he could be there to collect his jewelry for one. And it would also explain some things about like why, you know, Miss Marvel found the bangle on a on a blue arm. Yeah, on a Kree arm. And it would be able to tie kind of those threads together. So I think this movie is probably going to end with him getting out of the quantum realm and going straight to that next fight. I think we're going to pick it up pretty directly.
Yeah, and we think the Marvels and not Guardians of the Galaxy, because we know that that movie was written a while ago, right?
Right.
Before maybe all of this was settled. So I think they're going to have some reference perhaps to Kang or what's going on, or maybe what happens to the Guardians is so impactful that we don't have to have a direct Kang reference, but like who the team is moving forward is going to be important. But I do agree with you that we got to get him set up to be in the Marvels. And I will also say Phase 4, and you were just looking at clips of Captain Marvel and talking about how, you know, it wasn't the greatest of Phase 4, but that literally sets up the conflict between the Kree and the Skrull that would later cause or gives us our understanding for what ruined Kang's timeline, right?
Yeah.
The whole point of Captain Marvel was that the Kree were trying to get a weapon so that they could obliterate the Skrulls. That's what the energy core was. And then that weapon winds up being Captain Marvel that they abduct.
Which that's a really, really, really good point as you're making it, because we know that energy core is what ends up giving Captain Marvel her powers, Carol Danvers her powers. And the way that she gets her powers is very similar to what we see happening to Monica Rambeau. We watched these scenes next to each other the other day in terms of what's happening for them physically, the light that they're sharing, the type of energy that they're absorbing. And we see that with Kamala as well, like the blue lights coming around her. So if that is what destroyed Kang's timeline, if it is that type of power, I mean, we know he doesn't have superpowers, but to still be familiar with like that type of technology and that type of energy would explain why his power set, quote unquote, looks so similar to theirs when he's like shooting the blue light out of his hands and out of his eyes. Like it would really explain that connection just visually to us if it did tie back to those roots.
Yeah. I mean, I could also see him trying to eliminate Captain Marvel. Like if the Kree and Skrull are still trying, or the Kree are still trying to get her back, like the Supreme Intelligence, because she is the source of like, you know, what they needed, their energy. If he eliminated her, then that isn't there, and they don't have a weapon to use against the Skrull in the war that would later destroy his timeline.
Right.
So,
man.
Yeah. So where I think it, Kang escapes. That has to happen. So Kang escapes. I don't think our heroes are trapped, but I think we lose some folks. Maybe somebody will be trapped, and my guess would be Hank and Janet.
Hank and Janet dead, you're saying?
Dead or trapped. Either way, they're not going back.
No. Make a decision. Dead or trapped. Two very different. Our Janet, our Hank. Not multiversely, but like our Janet, our Hank, dead or alive at the end of the movie. Dead? Okay. I won't think we have to if that's what happens. And I don't feel like that's a consequence though. And maybe I'm just removed from these people. I've been shitting on Janet quite a bit throughout our conversation. I get that. But like if the worst stake that we have in Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania is that the old Ant-Man and the old Wasp are dead. I know y'all can't see me, but I'm batting my eyes right here because that doesn't feel like high enough stakes for a movie that's been amped up like this.
So I think you can build us up there. Like they've just been reunited. We know they love each other, right? And
you say it's been a couple years. Let's be clear. Like this movie can pick up immediately. It might, but if it happens in the timeline like we think it does, it's at least been a couple of years post blip.
Yeah, but we haven't seen it. But we also
Right.
have Hope, who grew up without her mother and now would
Mhm.
be losing both of her parents. And we know that this movie is going to focus on time, loved ones, relationships, being a parent, etc. So if Hope has to go through losing both parents, right, after having no time with her mother. So we focus on Scott losing that 5 years with Cassie, right, during the blip, but
Uh-huh.
lost way more than that with her mom. She would be more
Yeah.
so enticed by Kang to me than Scott.
What if we killed Hope? Because then Janet lost all that time with her daughter. Daughter's dead. Hank wasn't really connected with the daughter. You know, she was there. They had a life, but they really built a relationship with that first Ant-Man movie. Like they had time, but they didn't use it. And that would make sense for Scott, right? Like he had to lose her for a while. They weren't together. Well, I was saying they were both blipped. He wasn't blipped, but I was gonna say they had those 5 years apart, but he was 5 hours. I don't know. But what if it was Hope? Well, because why haven't we really seen her in the marketing for this movie either? What is she doing?
Well, we've
She's in
seen
it
her.
now, like a little bit in the more recent trailers, but she's not in any of the main trailers in terms of like spoken dialogue. We see a couple scenes of her like putting her hand in front of Cassie, but until the most recent like TV spots, tell me if I'm wrong here, but we didn't even hear her voice until these TV spots.
I feel like we heard her in the first. If I'm not mistaken, I feel like we did. Not a lot of
I
lines,
don't
but I feel like she said something.
considering her name is in the title. We have Wasp up here. I feel like there should be a stronger presence. I don't have a good sense of what she's doing. We see her with her parents at some points. We see her with Scott at others. I have no idea how she fits into this movie.
And they made the point of continuing to call the franchise Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Yeah. So I potentially believe the idea that what if Scott does the sacrificing, like we talked about Fantastic Four doing, to keep himself in the quantum realm, and she goes to join him, either to try to save him, thinking that she can get stuck there too, or it's like, I don't want him to be stuck alone. What if Hope is just stuck with Scott in the quantum realm at the end of the movie? Everyone else is out, two of them are stuck.
Okay. Because I believe the Fantastic Four will appear and we need to see them, I have to believe somebody's going to be stuck in the quantum realm. I'm not talking about dying,
Okay.
but somebody gets stuck in the quantum realm. And in getting them out, we get our Fantastic Four back. So here is where in our post-credit scene, our stuck person encounters the Fantastic Four. And I know people are like, well, they haven't cast them yet. How would they have recorded, for this film? But there are ways to use movie magic to show us the Fantastic Four without showing us the Fantastic Four. Like someone could just recognize or say, a voice or something, or show us the symbol on a costume that's laying on the ground. I don't know what they're going to do.
Yeah.
But I think that is a way for us to say the Fantastic Four are here, confirmation that this is the group that trapped Kang, and that is how they get out, because our character has to get out.
Right. Well, and we know too that if it's a post-credit scene, they could have filmed that a couple of weeks ago and tacked that on to the end of it.
Yeah.
If there's a post-credit scene that they want to add compared to like actual in-movie plot. And so I definitely see it being plausible that we could get a Fantastic Four post-credit scene, even if they just cast the characters. I don't think they would go from giving us like a John Krasinski on screen to a uniform folded on a chair. I think they maybe would have led with that. I think that there is a chance though that we at least get like a Ben Grimm or something that has been, it's been rumored for a while as well, to see at least one or two of them at the end, maybe the one or two that they have cast, or hear a reference to them, I guess. But I think if we're gonna get anything with the Fantastic Four in a post-credit scene, I think they would show us somebody.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So we have two post-credit team predictions then, right? You have the Fantastic Four. I think we're getting the Marvel set up. Is there any other possibility you see for a post-credit scene that we're not talking about? What else do they have to set up?
The rumor is Loki season 2.
Oh yeah. Possible. I think there's a chance we see Loki in this movie. I don't know how, I don't know where, I don't know why, but we're in the quantum realm. So it makes sense to me that he or Sylvie at least is around.
Well, what if that's how they get out? Loki gets him out.
Mean?
Like the TVA, like the time warp things, the little doorways. Just the way they
just open a door and get it.
The way they were saved on Lamentus is just like,
I
oh,
love it.
you out of here.
I mean, maybe.
Hey, if the TVA can be a part of Deadpool's movie, they can be a part of this movie.
Well, let's think about it though. Like at the end of Loki, he gets back to the TVA, and we see a statue of Kang the Conqueror, meaning that Kang the Conqueror is already running whatever TVA we're at. So it could be something located within this bubble, but like we have the conversation. Yeah, I see you. Please tell me what you're thinking before I even continue.
Oh, I'm so sorry. That's what Ravonna went to go do. She went to go get the Fantastic Four out.
What? How did we get there?
She went through things to save them. She's gonna get them out. I don't know. I just feel it in my bones. My bones just felt it.
I'm gonna need you to elaborate on that one.
Okay,
but yeah,
we know that He Who Remains sent her to do something, right? She's going in search of free will. That could mean whatever it means. But
how could that mean then? Yeah.
What if she went to go get them? They were the ones, in my theory, who trapped Kang there originally. So they were battling this Kang, right? So they're trapped. Ravonna shows up and collects whoever is in the ruins of this after that dangerous Kang has been released, right? And you just said that Kang at that moment has already taken over the TVA. So his statue is there. The Kang we're meeting now, this is what we assume, is that Kang who is in charge of
I want to be very clear. That's not necessarily what I'm saying. It could be the specific Kang, but there's also like many versions of Kang. It could be because again, I think that Chronopolis that we saw in Ant-Man and the Wasp was a different quantum. You know, I think that we have multiple versions. I think there could be multiple TVAs. I'm not going to commit. But what I am going to commit to, what I am going to say here is if I think if anything, this like builds up the idea of what that threshold could have been. Because if the threshold happens during this movie, it would make sense how there's already another, because like we're in quantum time here, right? But he gets sent to the TVA before it's timey-wimey, you know, you never know. But he gets sent right before Sylvie stabs this guy. So he gets back and that TVA has already been changed. And so it makes sense to me if what this threshold was perhaps something going on in the quantum realm in this movie that leads, it looks, for the hell of it, let's say it is this Kang that gets out and gets in charge of the TVA. Could be 10 other versions of the character. Either way, some Kang is ruling the TVA when we get out, and there has to be some reason for that. And it makes sense if the threshold that we talk about here was in fact another Kang breaking out of jail, getting out of it. Like the Ant-Man movies are all heist movies. We got a jailbreak movie now, and getting out and then conquering.
Yeah, but also, okay, so a part of what we've seen in the trailers is that Ant-Man and the crew also need Kang to get out of the quantum realm. So they don't have, like, every time they get out of the quantum realm, somebody comes and gets them, or like there's somebody on the outside that helps them get out. So they don't have the means to get out of the quantum realm. So we have to figure out how any of them are going to get out, unless it's like Kang is going through the portal and you grab his foot and he drags you with him type of deal. That, like, if the rumor is a post-credit scene for the TVA, it would make sense for the TVA, or maybe it doesn't. Or someone with TVA technology has to bring our heroes out of the quantum realm, and they would be able to. So I don't know if that's Ravonna. To me, it would need to be Ravonna. If it's Loki, then that's too much, right? But Ravonna is off on her side adventure, on her own little quest. And to me, you could use her in order to get them out. And that could be in a post-credit scene, or maybe the thing that people think is a post-credit scene is really going to be the end of our film.
Yeah. I would believe that there is a version of this where I just firmly believe that Ravonna is in the movie. Just like in the movie.
I think she's at the end. I think that is how they get out of the quantum realm. Book it. Put your bets on it.
Okay, that's the final bet is that Ravonna takes everybody out of the quantum realm?
Somebody's getting on the bus with Ravonna and they're headed out of the quantum realm.
All right, well, I'm not with you on that. But I do believe that maybe when Ravonna says she's going in search of, when she says she's going in search of free will, she had previously, and you were the one that brought this out to me, that she talks about free will being, who has free will? The one in charge. What if, and this is a theory that you had, that she's like running the TVA with this likeness and then breaks Kang out of the quantum. she could just break him out and bring him here and be like, I have maintained your kingdom, or something of that nature.
Yeah, but also like when she says she's in search of free will, I don't see her as the type of character, well, maybe, who would get that power for someone else and call that free will. If she's in search of free will, she's in search of power for herself.
Yeah.
And it would make sense for her to be collecting folks who had the power to stop Kang if she knows like another Kang is on the way.
Well, we don't know that she doesn't like Kang though. And that's the thing, is they're kind of star-crossed lovers, right? Like they like each other in some versions, they don't like each other in others. And even when she talks about him, having the timekeepers, she's like, there's got to be a reason. There's something bigger that we don't know, and she is still blindly trusting in him.
I see that, but what if the file that she gets from Miss Minutes is actually like a love note confession from He Who Remains that says, I love you, I've loved you for all of time, this is the truth, and another version of me is on the way, and he is evil and he is bad. The same thing he was telling Loki and Sylvie, and he's gonna do blah, blah, blah.
Consistently in the comics, Ravonna, like the big thing about her is she is an independent baddie. The couple times where she comes confronted with Kang and she's having a conversation with him and realizes that he has kind of controlled her life or like put her in a specific direction, she gets really mad. She's like, it's not your life to save, it's not yours to do this. And so, those tenets do fit with this character that we see in Loki, where she's upset to know she doesn't have free will. She's in search of these things. And I'm trying to think back to what her solvency in the comics are for that, because the character motivation, at least, whether it be the plot or not, is pretty similar in terms of she did not like the idea that Kang had like destined her life, even though he had sent out her life force across time, ensuring that she was reborn over and over and over and over. I'm not sure how these characters fit together, but I definitely think that there is a good possibility that she shows up in the movie. I bring that up because I don't think that a love note would convince her to do anything. I think it'd piss her off. If she's like, oh, you love me? Okay. But I do think there's a version where maybe she got some information about like, this Kang is trapped here, or it's something that gets her to the quantum realm. I'm not sure what that information would be, what would motivate her, but
I don't know that he's going to say like this. Okay, let me flesh this out. So I'm making this up as we go along. When I say a love note, I do feel like he confesses his feelings or whatever, because we have to at some point we haven't gotten anything that links them together romantically at all in any of this, and that's a major part of their story. So
right, that's the whole story.
Yeah, but maybe what I'm saying it's a love note is that he wants her to be protected. Like you mentioned, the one Kang that was rebuffed killing Ravonna after she said no, right? So maybe he thinks that this Kang is dangerous to her, right? It's just dangerous. He's trying to equip her to be able to handle him. So like a file, it's a file. It could have information about the Fantastic Four, information about this, because Kang would be aware of all of these entities and groups and people, right? So she might be collecting weapons or whatever, you know what I mean? Ways to fight this Kang.
Man, I just want to know what's on that file. I just really want to know. And what I love about it is I think that is something that we will eventually get an answer to. I'm just not sure when. I did notice earlier today, though, on the Loki IMDb page, she is only credited for 6 episodes, aka the first 6 of last season. Other people are credited for season 2 episodes already, even though they haven't aired. For example, our fun friend, I forget his name, the guy who played with the Infinity Stones as paperweights and stuff, he's credited for 9 episodes. Okay. And a lot of other people have the season 2 stuff on there, but they intentionally do not tell us how many episodes. I don't believe she's not in any of it, but it could be because she's making the transition to the big screen instead of primarily being in Loki.
But I feel like it's already been confirmed that she's in season 2. But I do think,
but we don't know that she's a main character.
Yeah.
And we got a lot to talk about. And as we're having this conversation, the world premiere actually just started, the red carpet for Quantumania. So that's how close we are to this movie actually coming out.
So folks are going to have the answers that we want. They're going to know.
hopefully we'll be able to have maybe a little bit more dialogue before this movie comes out. But in case this is it, Malcolm, do you have any other final predictions for what you think you're going to see in Quantumania?
So these are all the crazy things that we don't have to provide support for. We're just saying them out.
Sure. Hopefully you have support for it, but put the wild pitch out. Put the wild pitch out. I'm not going to question you. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I've been thinking about this the entire time, and now that you've asked me, my mind has completely blanked.
Of course. Yeah.
Oh, I think that our friend Quays plays a
William Jackson Harper.
Yes, plays a larger role moving forward. And this is the first we see of him, but not the last.
All I'm going to say on that point is, God, I hope so. I love William Jackson Harper. I loved him in The Good Place. I cannot wait to see what he brings to our screen. And I think it's fantastic that we have not seen any trace of him in any of the trailers, because that is something like even in some of the most recent promos, we've seen other freedom fighters. We have not even seen his face in any promotion. And I am tremendously excited to see what they do with him. But that's a good one. And I definitely think so. I think this is going to be so off the wall. I don't actually think this is like very rogue theory here. I think we're going to see a Moon Knight. I think we're getting a little bit of Moon Knight in this. Maybe not in a big way, right? But we know that there are deep ties between Kang and Egypt when it comes to the Rama-Tut storyline. I think we're absolutely going to get that fleshed out in Kang Dynasty. I think we're going to get that on screen in Kang Dynasty. But I definitely think that there is some version of that creeps its way into this film, even just in reference to that time. We know that Ravonna at one point actually served as Moon Knight while Kang was Rama-Tut, which is fantastic. It's not a one of the comics I've read, but it's something I've heard about and seen in my research on that Marvel wiki, which is, again, fantastic resource. But I definitely think that there is going to be some type of connection there, just because there's so many Easter eggs, so many ways that it can be unpacked. So I think we're gonna get a little. How amazing would it be to see Oscar Isaac on screen with
Jonathan Majors?
Yeah, with Jonathan Majors, because both of them, Jonathan Majors is like inherently playing a character that has so many faces to him, so many personalities, so many identities throughout time, and that's what Stephen Grant is, right? Or not even just Stephen Grant, but like Mark Spector. Like it is one character in like 1,000 different ways. And to see those two men together on screen, I think would be fantastic. And I think there is absolutely a way in which that happens, even if maybe post credit, maybe we allude to it here, but I want to see a little Moon Knight.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just excited. Like I want to like teleport myself to next week and be in the theater and watch this movie. I cannot wait. I don't think we'll be disappointed. I just have a feeling that we'll be disappointed. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all for checking out our office hours today. We will check back and clock back in next week.
All right. Till next time.
Like, comment, subscribe. Y'all know the shtick. I don't want to end the meeting.